Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about multiplying and dividing integers. Now there are several ways of dealing with multiplying and dividing integers. I'm going to focus on just one way of teaching it to you today. The big thing I want to make sure you understand is there is a major difference as far as the rules with using multiplying and dividing integers as there is with doing adding and subtracting integers. So you just want to make sure that you don't mix up the rules. And I would say the key thing to understand with the multiplying and dividing integers is that when you see a negative sign, that means opposite. For example, if you have the number 7, what is the opposite of 7? Well, the opposite of 7 is negative. And so when you see the negative sign, that means opposite. And that's going to play a role in here in a little bit. For example, if I have the problem 4 times 3, and by the way, the dot, it means the same thing as the x does in multiplication. You can also use parentheses for multiplying. So we'll use dots because we're moving towards algebraic thinking, and we're going to get rid of using the x to signify multiplying. But going back to this, if I have 4 times 3, we learned previously that this would equal 12. Now, if I was to make this a negative 4, now I'm going to say, well, if 4 times 3 is 12, then I have one negative sign. I know I'm going to take the opposite of that answer. So the opposite of 12 would then be negative 12. If I had then another negative sign for the 3, and I'm now doing negative 4 times negative 3, well, now I'm going to take the opposite of the negative 12 and make it into a positive. So then I have negative 4 times negative 3 is actually positive 12. And the easiest way to do this, as I tell my students, if there is an even amount of negative signs, you're always going to get a positive answer. And if you have an odd amount, one negative sign, 3 negative signs, 5 negative signs, if you have an odd amount of negative signs, you're always going to get a negative answer. If you can understand that concept, this becomes very, very easy. And so hopefully we'll be able to try this together as we're going through some of the different problems, and you're going to see just how this works out. And well, let's go ahead and try a few more. So put this one to rest, and we'll get ourselves a new one. And this way of doing the even amount of negative signs, odd amount of negative signs, this works for multiplying and dividing. So we're going to do a little bit of each. So it doesn't matter if you multiply or divide, this rule sticks for both things. So doing another multiplication problem. Let's say that we have negative 3 times negative 5. Again, this is, you're going to have 3 times 5 is 15. There's two negatives. 1, 2, 2 negatives, so it's going to be a positive 15. Whereas if you have negative 8 times positive 3, well, 8 times 3 is 24. I have one negative sign, and since 1 is an odd amount, it's going to be negative, therefore it is negative 24. Now this, as I mentioned before, this works for division as well. So, if you have a problem such like this one, we'll say negative 20 divided by negative 4. Well, again, we're going to first focus on the division part. 20 divided by 4 is going to get us 5. And then I have 2 negative signs. Well, 2 is an even amount, therefore the answer's got to be positive. So the answer in this one's going to be positive 5. Now, we could have positive 40 divided by negative 10. Well, 40 divided by 10, that's 4. And since we have one negative sign, that's odd. The answer's got to be negative, so we end up having negative 4. Some of you may have heard of good person, bad person. If something good happens to a good person, it makes you happy. If something good happens to a bad person, it makes you kind of sad. If something bad happens to a good person, you feel kind of sad. And if something bad happens to a bad person, it feels kind of good. You can do the same type of thinking for here. If I have with the negative 20, well, here, let me do it this way. We're going to do this together using the good person, bad person way of doing it. And I would like to go more in depth with that, although it's just a little trick to do this. But it's rather time consuming to teach it to you, and so I think you'll understand the basic technique, so I don't want to spend too much time teaching it. If I have negative 30 divided by 5, well, first of all, I have 30 divided by 5 is 6, and then this is me using the good person, bad person analogy. The negative 30 would be bad. So if a bad thing happens to, well, 5 is positive, to a good person, I feel bad for that person. So the answer is going to be negative 6. A bad thing happens to a good person, I feel bad. Or if something bad happens to a bad person, then that makes me feel kind of good. I mean, I'm not saying that I condone it or it's right, but it makes you feel, you snicker a little bit. That's what they got. So we have negative 20 times negative 3 is 60. A bad thing happens to a bad person, makes some people feel kind of good inside. Now I'm going to give you guys one more set of problems, but in this set of problems, what we're going to do is we are going to look at multiple steps. So let's say in this problem we have, see, number 8. Let's say we have negative 1 times negative 2 times negative 3 times 4 times negative 1. What does that equal? Go ahead and erase this. Well, what I would suggest doing is ignore the negative signs right now. We're not even going to worry about the negative signs. We're just going to go through and we'll say, well, 1 times 2 is 2. 2 times 3 is 6. 6 times 4 is 24. 24 times 1 is 24. So we've got our 24. And then I'm just going to count up on my negative signs. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 negative signs. I end up having, well, 4 is even, so therefore the answer has got to be even, and that'll be positive 24. So since there is 4, it's even, it's a positive answer, it's positive 24. Whereas one other way you can do it if you prefer, if I have negative 2 times 1 times 2 times negative 1 times negative 3, if I have it this way, another way I can do this is I can do it one step at a time. I could have negative 2 times 1 is negative 2 and bring everything else down. Then I would do negative 2 times positive 2, a bad thing happens to a good person, would be negative 4 times negative 1 times negative 3. Then I have negative 4 times negative 4 is positive 4 times negative 3. And together, if we have positive 4 times negative 3, a good thing happens to a bad person, we feel bad, and it'll end up being negative 12 as our answer. So, these are going to be the ins and outs of multiplying and dividing integers. I hope this was helpful. Have a fantastic day, and I'll talk to you next time.